Hello everybody and welcome to our meeting of the Murder Mystery Book Club. Our novel for today, March 4th, is Before She Was Helen by Carolyn B. Cooney. This is a quick and friendly spoiler warning that discussion past this point and in the comments of the video post will include spoilers for the novel. If you haven't yet read it, copies are available through the library's Hoopla database. Our story begins in the Sun City retirement community where Clemmy is facing the distasteful task of having to check in on her neighbor. A notorious recluse with a bad attitude, Dom is not friend to anyone on the street, but there is the chance that he may need medical assistance as he hasn't responded to Clemmy's texts. As Clemmy searches his home, she finds that Dom is missing, but inside his garage is a homemade door cut out to the neighboring unit. Curious as to why Dom would have cut his own door into the wall between his and the neighboring unit, owned by a couple named the Coglins, who are even more reclusive than Dom himself, Clemmy decides to investigate heading into the unit. She finds that the Coglins' unit is almost completely barren of any signs of habitation. With minimal furniture, the only personal item appears to be a glass sculpture of a dragon and a tree. Awed by the beauty and artistry of the sculpture, Clemmy quickly snaps a picture with her phone and sends it to her grandniece and nephew. After vacating her neighbor's unit, she heads out to meet with her friends for social events, where we find out that they know her as Helen, an assumed identity. It isn't long before Clemmy's grandniece and nephew respond to her text of the image with the information that the sculpture is actually used for marijuana smoking and has been reported stolen by its creator, Boro Basque. Clemmy is horrified at the idea of being involved in a police investigation and the potentially dangerous world of drug dealers. Her troubles mount when her niece sends her an email containing family updates and a link to a news article about the reopening of a cold case in their former hometown of the high school basketball coach that had been closed to Clemmy and her family. It is at this point that we see a time shift in the narrative as we begin to tell two stories. The horrors of Clemmy's high school and college years in the 1950s and 60s, coupled with her current problems today in the retirement community. The cold case being reopened in her hometown involves local basketball coach Rudyard Creek, a man that Clemmy finds absolutely terrifying in her memories. Rudyard Creek had coached Clemmy's brother in basketball, was well known and liked throughout the town and school, and had even been to Clemmy's house as a guest for dinner. Therefore, when he offered her a ride home from school, she had no reason to believe he had any ill intentions. However, Rudyard Creek was a villain who sexually assaulted Clemmy and left her pregnant. In order to avoid any social stigma, Clemmy is shipped away to a home for young, unwed mothers. At the facility, the young girls carry out their pregnancies to term, and after they deliver the babies, the infants are given away in discreet, quiet adoptions. Although she doesn't wish to be parted from her child, Clemmy knows that there's no way she can raise him as a single mother, and reluctantly agrees to allow the Smith family to adopt him. However, while she was meeting the family, one of the other young mothers had slipped into the woman's purse and pulled out her ID to determine the adoptive family's actual name and address. However, her nightmare is far from over. Although Rudyard Creek has married, his wife has been unable to have a child, and he knows that Clemmy became pregnant as a result of his assault. Determined to claim his child, he stalks her at every turn, making her life miserable. Clemmy is unable to find help from any quarter as her family persists in believing that Creek is actually a good man and provides him with her address anytime he asks for information. When she attempts to hide in college by moving to an off-campus apartment with a friend, Rudyard still finds her address, shows up at the apartment, and assaults her friend. Even when she reaches out to her son's adoptive father in desperation to warn him about Creek's plans, he refuses to believe her, deciding that she must be a woman of low morals and attempting to destroy his family. Desperate to escape, Clemmy pulls out an old school assignment she had saved for years. a biography of a fellow classmate named Helen Stevenson. Helen had provided both her social security card and her passport for the assignment, but had tragically passed away before the assignment was due. Clemmy had held on to the documents all these years, and now they were the perfect way for her to assume an identity and escape. Unable to live under the threat of Rudyard Creek any longer, Clemmy devises a plan to meet him in an isolated location, and with the help of her former roommate to finally end his threat once and for all. Clemmy devises a plan for herself, her former roommate, and her son's adoptive father to meet Creek in an isolated location and force him to back off. Though they are armed with a gun and manage to shoot Creek, he still overpowers both Clemmy and her roommate and begins assaulting them. Horrified by the situation, her son's adoptive father strikes Creek in the head with the metal grating of a nearby barbecue grill. Not wanting to see anyone else's life further harmed by Creek, Clemmy insists that both her roommate and her son's adoptive father leave the area while she remains in order to gather up the weapons and destroy any evidence. Clemmy is left alone with an injured Rudyard Creek, and as she searches for the weapons used against him, he succumbs to his injuries and passes away. For Clemmy, it's never clear if his cause of death was from the bullet wounds, the head injury, or simply the fact that she never called for an ambulance. At the same time, in present day, the creator of the sculpture, Boro Basque, subtly interrogates Clemmy's grandnephew Bentley to gain more information on her. Although Bentley does not know exactly where Clemmy lives, as all of her mail is directed to a post office box, he provides enough information that Boro Basque is able to investigate further and locate her exactly. In addition to having his sculpture stolen, Boro Basque had also lost a large chunk of money from his illegal drug business. Arranging a meeting with Clemmy, Boro Basque quickly discovers her dual identities and uses the information to blackmail her, terrorizing her into helping him search both Dom and the Coughlin's units. He holds Clemmy hostage in her own home. Although continual searches of both Dom's unit and the Coughlin's reveal precious little, it isn't long before the body of a murder victim turns up in Dom's garage. The body is that of a young man known only as Wilson, who will provide aid to Dominic, driving him to appointments and helping him run errands. As law enforcement descends on Sun City in order to investigate the murder, Boro Basque finds himself trapped, becoming more and more desperate to escape. Meanwhile, though Clemmy has multiple opportunities to admit the truth, she finds herself unable to trust law enforcement and too terrified of what will happen if her secrets are revealed to admit that she is being held hostage by a drug dealer. In the end, it is revealed that Wilson's murderer is actually Clemmy's best friend, Joyce. Knowing that Wilson was supplying residents of Sun City with marijuana, she too had snuck into the Coughlin's unit in order to poke around and investigate. There she had found the stolen drug money and, deciding it was a victimless crime, had kept it for herself. However, Wilson had concealed a hidden camera on the premises and knew exactly who had taken the money. When he confronted Joyce about her theft, she shot him and left his body inside the golf cart in Dom's garage. Discovering Wilson's body, Dom had fled in order to avoid his own illegal activities coming to light. As Joyce had been caught on camera disposing of the murder weapon and admitted to police that she had killed Wilson, Clemmy's involvement in the case appears to be at an end. Though Clemmy still lives in fear of her dual identity being revealed and her being held responsible for Rudyard Creek's murder even all these years later, it's revealed at the end of the novel that the cold case involving Creek being reopened is not actually the case of his murder, but the sexual assault and murder of another young woman. At the time, Creek had been a strong suspect, but due to the lack of DNA technology available, they hadn't been able to prove he was the culprit. However, DNA collected from Rudyard Creek's murder was then compared to DNA evidence collected from the young woman's murder. Finding a match, they were finally able to prove that Rudyard Creek was a villain. Though the true number of his victims may never be known, and he can no longer be tried and held accountable in a court of law for his crimes, this information does provide some comfort for his victims as the truth is finally known, and Clemmy can finally no longer live in fear of him. The novel raises fascinating questions on the ideas of what is our true identity and how much privacy do we have. Clemmy makes the point early in the novel that in Sun City you can be whoever you choose. Your friends and neighbors believe the story of your life that you tell them regardless of whether or not it's the truth. Though Clemmy lives her life under an assumed name in a very literal sense, taking on the identity of Helen Stevenson, other characters do the same, as Rudyard Creek lives in public as an upstanding member of the community, while in private is a vicious serial rapist. Even Joyce, who appears to be a carefree woman living out her retirement years enjoying social activities with friends, hides the fact that she is capable not only of theft but cold-blooded murder to protect herself. The novel presents the era of the 1950s and 60s as much more socially conservative, with many topics simply taboo and never discussed. Though it's easy to look back with a critical eye on the standards of the time, and to wonder at the naivete in sharing such vital personal documentation as social security cards and passports with a virtual stranger, it also begs the question of, are we truly more safe today? Though one can argue that society is much more progressive and open to discussing things, that openness can also breach our privacy. In both her past and present, Clemmy finds herself in danger because her family willingly shares the information they have on her with the smooth-talking, charming villain. The simple sharing of a photograph with her grandniece and nephew puts Clemmy in the middle of a harrowing ordeal with a drug dealer. With more and more records being digitized and uploaded every day, and people sharing the minutiae of their lives on social media in an effort to reach out to friends and loved ones across the world, can we truly say that we are better off, or are we still as vulnerable as those young schoolgirls in the 1950s who willingly shared their identification documents with each other without a second thought? I really enjoyed this novel and would recommend it to fans of the mystery genre. However, these are just my thoughts and I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe Clemmy was justified in her actions in allowing Rudyard Creek to die rather than calling for help? If you found yourself in her position, would you take similar extreme actions, not only to avoid your attacker but to stay close to your child? When starting a new phase in your life, do you take the opportunity to share with those around you the truth of who you are, or the story of who you wish you were? Please leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section of this video. I can't wait to hear what everybody thought. Don't forget to stay tuned to the library's website and social media for more information about our upcoming programs. We've got some great things planned, including crafts, tutorials, and more. I can't wait to see you all next time. Bye!